Big preview last week. If you were watching any sort of Michigan media, you probably saw a fair amount of announcements and unveilings from the North American International Auto Show, the 2017 edition. That's the way it goes. The pomp and circumstance and unveilings and glitz and flash happens, and then you get a chance to go. And so you can run over to Cobo Center in Detroit and check it out through Sunday. There, all the 2017 models on display, and also on display concept cars and things like that. One of the somewhere on the order of 5,000 journalists that covers that event is Mark Phelan, the auto writer for the Detroit Free Press, and he joins us this morning. Welcome back, Mark.
Good to be with you, Richard. Thank you.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that time. Boy, you know, a few years ago when the recession was thick and heavy, the automakers scaled down their displays and tried to be somewhat understated. That's all gone again, right? I mean, we're back to all the flash and spectacle. Is that true?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've had 2 years in a row with more than 17 million sales of vehicles being sold in the U.S. That had never happened before, and they are making the most of it. They are fighting hard for every single customer. It looks like there's practically a virtual reality test drive machine in every corner, it feels like, at the show, and tons of new vehicles.
Virtual reality. I think I saw one of those last year. You're saying there's more. This actually...
There's several of them.
Yeah. This makes you simulate the experience of driving a car you're looking at.
Absolutely. In fact, one of them gives you the chance to simulate driving the Ford GT supercar around the famous race course at Le Mans in France. So even cars that you're not looking at seriously, it may be your only chance to find out what it's like to drive that, or the Acura NSX supercar. There are long lines for the virtual reality booths, and everybody seems to be enjoying them.
Well, if you can go to a bar and do a simulated golf game at Pebble Beach, I guess you can drive a Ford GT in a simulator too.
Yes.
That's pretty good. Did you try it?
I did not, because there was such a long line when I was there on Sunday with my niece and nephew. But they tried a couple of the other VR games and did enjoy themselves quite a bit.
Yeah. Last year, I recall there being, I think it was a Dodge Charger, where you could get in and actually sit in a Charger and run a simulated course and get the feel of what that was like. This really is something to be able to practically test drive a car without moving it.
Oh, it's amazing how realistic it is. I mean, you feel like you are moving around the track. I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah. We're talking with Mark Phelan of the Detroit Free Press. When we come back in a minute, we'll talk about what some of the most impressive things are that Mark saw at the North American International Auto Show, which you can see too. WBCK, we're here with Mark Phelan on the line, auto reporter for the Detroit Free Press. We're talking about the North American International Auto Show. Boy, oh boy, trucks, right?
Absolutely. A new SUV in every garage seems to be the motto this year.
Boy, and it is interesting because I think almost all automakers have been really scaling back their small car production because folks aren't into that right now.
Definitely, and part of that is because there's a new class of small SUVs that people are moving to that give them the kind of fuel that they would have gotten in a mid-sized car or a compact car a few years ago. So you don't run into the big 8-9 mile a gallon problem, but you still have the high seating position and the available all-wheel drive. So you get the best of both worlds. What's
the one with the biggest buzz now in that category?
Among the small ones, the new Jeep Compass. It's the replacement, obviously, for a vehicle Chrysler has built for a long time, but it looks completely different. It's like a mini Grand Cherokee, almost. It goes on sale in about 6 weeks, I think, and it's probably going to be Jeep's best-selling vehicle around the world. They already build it in 4 different factories on 4 different continents. So this has got the makings of a serious hit. Bigger than in terms of family SUVs, the Chevy Traverse looks like a serious winner. Chevrolet reduced the weight by 350 pounds, which means better fuel economy, but somehow they managed to make it a little bit bigger, so it's got even more room for up to 8 passengers. It's an impressive feat.
Interesting. I think one of the touted benefits of Fiat and Chrysler getting married was the notion that Jeep would double its sales and reach areas of the globe it had not reached before. Is that happening?
That is one of the things that Fiat Chrysler has definitely delivered on, yes. Jeep sales have set records in, I think, each of the last 3 years. They're headed toward being consistently over 2 million a year. And this new Compass hasn't even gone on sale here yet, but it's already being built in Mexico, China, Brazil, and India.
Wow, very interesting. Ford made some big announcements, too, speaking of trucks and SUVs. Man.
They sure did. And the most interesting one for me is that the F-150 pickup, the best-selling vehicle in America, gets a small diesel engine for the first time ever. It'll be a 3-liter V6 diesel, so it's big enough that you'll still be able to do some serious towing, but it could have a pretty radical effect on the F-150's fuel economy, and it could force other truck makers to follow suit.
It makes sense when you think about it that a diesel engine is the preferred choice when you're pulling heavy stuff. I mean, just look at semis. That's the engine of choice. But it seems to be gaining popularity, as you point out, with trucks.
Absolutely. Pickups and SUVs can make the most of the towing capacity and the ability to just pull out of deep mud and things like that that the torque diesel gives you provide. And they've also got better fuel economy than a similarly powerful gasoline engine. So even when gas prices are cheap, that's attractive. But as we've seen lately, they've started to creep back up.
Ford announced they're going to bring back the Bronco and the Ranger. Any ideas what that Bronco is going to look like? Is it going to be a modern version or a retro version?
First of all, we don't know. All they showed us was a picture of the badge.
Okay.
So we know that the badge will still be chrome. We can say that with certainty. I would guess that it will be a modern version because Ford has so thoroughly updated the look of all of its vehicles that I think that if you looked at vehicles like the Escape and the Edge, that it'll probably be from that end of the spectrum. But it's very difficult to say because the old Bronco, despite having been gone for a long time, still has a lot of loyal customers, and they want this to be an off-road vehicle, so they might go with something a little bit more retro and boxy looking.
Mm-hmm. I have a friend who had a Bronco back then, and all you have to do is say Bronco, and he'll chime on for a long time about how much he loved it.
Yep.
It's pretty cool. In a minute, we'll talk about the Ranger and the whole notion of trucks that aren't the big trucks, supposedly. But some of these smaller trucks still look pretty large, and we'll talk about that in just a second on WBCK. A few more minutes with Mark Phelan, auto writer at the Detroit Free Press. So that Ranger, I saw some pictures of the overseas Ranger that's already being sold. We presume the one here would be similarly styled. It looked quite good. The thing is, I presume Ford has a balancing act because they don't want to take sales away from the F-150, right?
That was one of the puzzles that everybody faced with midsize pickups a few years ago. And then, GM brought the Chevy Colorado back, and it appears that there's a completely different audience out there who's looking for the midsize pickups, even though they're as big as a full-size F-150 or Chevy Silverado of 20 years ago was. I mean, this is not a small vehicle. It's considerably bigger than the old Ranger, and you're right, it's going to look quite a bit more modern, we expect, a little bit more rounded around the edges.
So not a lot of worry about it stealing too much business.
No, they're more worried about losing the sales to the Chevrolet Colorado than taking any away from the F-150, I think.
Interesting. So we talked a lot about SUVs and trucks. People are still buying cars, right?
Absolutely. absolutely. And there's a lot of really interesting new cars at the show floor. For me, the thing that dropped my jaw is the new 2018 Toyota Camry, because for years the Camry has had a reputation as incredibly reliable and really boring. And this one is a complete departure. It looks like $1 million. If you think about what Chevrolet did with the Malibu a year ago, when they dropped this great-looking mid-size sedan on us, the Camry does some of the same for Toyota. And Toyota's big Lexus luxury brand has a new version of their LS sedan that does the same thing. It's as if, Toyota suddenly has really gotten serious about styling.
It is interesting. It seems like an overarching theme with new cars now is to give you a look that looks more expensive than maybe it is. I imagine that's a balancing act because you just illustrated it. So you got a great-looking Camry, but you still don't want to have a Lexus buyer say, oh, maybe I'll just get a Camry, right?
It's one of the challenges for automakers that have more than one brand. How do you make the volume brand like Toyota really good without cutting into the territory of your luxury brand Lexus? Ford has faced the same challenge with Lincoln, and it was something that GM wrestled with for years with Cadillac.
The Free Press chose the car of the year as the Chevy Bolt. That's B as in boy, O-L-T. This is the little crossover that is electric. With gas prices having been lower, there's not been a lot of buzz about small cars and this type of vehicle, but obviously the automakers think there will be.
They do for sure. They think that the trend going forward is for electric, to have electric systems in virtually all vehicles, but more and more to offer purely electric vehicles that don't have an engine in them at all. And the Bolt has got the potential to be a breakthrough because it's got the pricing to attract normal buyers like you and me, but it has enough range to go 238 miles on a charge. So nobody's going to be worried about, or very few people will be worried about not being able to complete their daily driving. It could be the first all-electric vehicle that's really practical for everyday use by a lot of people.
That was probably the challenge with all of the electric vehicles, is that the range just wasn't good enough, but obviously they've been working on it.
That very much so. And the Bolt is going to make obsolete a lot of other car companies' new electric vehicles probably before they even hit the road. Nobody else is close to it right now for range.
Wow, interesting. What other things were your favorites?
Oh, Nissan had pulled out all the stops with a nice looking concept car that hints at what the next Altima is going to be. They've got a small SUV called the Rogue Sport as well. And Honda has a new minivan. The best-selling minivan in the country for the last few years has been the Honda Odyssey. They've got an all-new version of that looks really good, and it's got some nice tricky things in how the seats work, because for a minivan, it's interior flexibility and room that determines success or failure. And it looks like the new Odyssey is going to be a strong competitor for the new Pacifica minivan that Chrysler introduced last year.
Mm-hmm. It is interesting because some automakers said we're out of the minivan business, Ford, GM, but those that are left have really committed to it.
Absolutely. There's enough customers for minivans that 3 or 4 companies can make a lot of money, and Nissan, Honda, Toyota, and Nissan, and to a lesser extent Kia are all working hard at it. GM, Ford, and the rest moved over toward the family-style SUVs like the Ford Explorer and the Chevy Traverse. That's where they put their emphasis.
Mm-hmm. This whole business with Volkswagen and the fuel economy issue, is that going to hurt them, do you think?
Probably for years, in part because it looks like they finally settled it, first of all. They've got agreements with the government about what level of fines they'll pay. A number of executives have been charged or arrested for conspiracy and other crimes. But the diesels were their most popular vehicle, so they have to find a way to generate some excitement. One of the ways they're trying to do that is with a new 7-seat 7 or 8 seat, I believe, family carrying SUV called the Atlas. That type of vehicle has been a missing spot in their lineup for a long time. And they're also trying to draw a lot of attention to a brand of all-electric vehicles that they're going to launch within the VW brand in a couple of years. It's called ID, as in show me your ID. And there's a microvan concept that looks kind of like an electrified autonomous version of the old hippie VW microbus. That's on the show floor, and it's been drawing a lot of attention.
I'll bet it has. Speaking of autonomous vehicles in the amount of time we have left, Mary Barra at GM got out there and said, hey, we're going full speed ahead with this. Others are too. How soon would we, do you think, be able to go to a dealer and buy a car that drives itself?
The question is, how far will it be able to drive itself? We're within a year or two of cars that will probably be able to do just about all the work once you get onto the highway. So, from entrance ramp to exit ramp, that technology pretty much exists today. Where they've got farther to go is with bad weather, like you and I are both suffering through today. If it's raining really heavily, can the autonomous car's cameras tell where the edge of the road is? If it's snowing, the same problem. But also, how do they deal with really complicated environments where there's yield signs and stop signs and traffic lights and emergency vehicles? So complete autonomy for a vehicle that will work around your neighborhood, downtown, everywhere else, that's still years away.
Okay. Who's the leader in this technology now?
Boy, that's a great question. It is possible that GM will be when they get the fully autonomous Chevrolet Bolts that they're going to be testing next year, later on this year on the road. And those cars, the Bolt is built just north of Detroit, so there's a lot of interest in them for a lot of reasons. But every company has got major programs on autonomy, and of course, Google was the one that started this whole ball rolling, so they have to be one of the leaders. They hired Chrysler to build them a million minivans that they then equipped with autonomous systems. We haven't seen any of those on the road yet. So I would say that the two to watch for interesting developments this year would probably be General Motors and Google.
Very interesting. Mark Phelan covers the auto industry for the Detroit Free Press, and that includes intimate portraits of new vehicles as well as the industry in general. And we'll look forward to your reporting over the coming year.
Thank you very much, Richard.
Thank you, Mark Phelan, Detroit Free Press.